The No Kings protest. What's really going on here? Does anyone know? Today, what I want to talk about is the No Kings protest that I saw going in. Saw them on the sides of the road, saw the signs and everything like that. I had to meet somebody in a parking lot, and there was a lot of protesters, I guess you would call them, on the side of the road with their signs, and I'm hearing a lot of horns honking. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there's a lot of horns honking to support this in my town, which is pretty conservative. So I was kind of interested to see what was going on. So I paid a little closer attention, which is something I think that we all need to do. Pay a little closer attention. I started looking at the signs. I saw nothing that said No Kings. I mean, obviously we all know what No Kings protest is. It's not about not wanting a king. It's about not wanting Donald Trump. So, I mean, I don't remember there being many No Kings protests whenever Joe Biden was in office. I guess that would have been my responsibility, but like, I'm not going to do that. So, all the signs said like, we love America, red, white, and blue, stuff like this. So like, if you're part of the country that doesn't really like pay attention to what's going on, which is a lot of people, it's not an indictment. It's just, it is what it is. You see a pro-America sign, red, white, and blue. And so what do? You honk. Yeah. Support, support, support. Well, then that kind of gives, in my opinion, like a false sense of approval from then like the No Kings protesters are on the side of the road and they're like, hey, look, all these people support us, but really, I don't think they do. But I mean, that's just my opinion. That's an observation. So what I wanted to do was talk to somebody. I don't want to debate anybody. I'm not sharp enough to do that. I'm no like Charlie Kirk or Candace Owens or, Matt Knowles, anybody like that. I just wanted to talk to somebody. So I pull up kind of to their group and I'm kind of scanning who there are. And I see an older gentleman with a Vietnam War vet hat on. So I think, okay, this is somebody I can respect. He fought in the war, fought for our country, and he is out here supporting the No Kings movement. Let me talk to this guy. So I call him over. I said, hey, let me ask you a couple questions. He said, all right, super nice guy. Very sweet. So he comes over and I said, so what's going on here today? Just kind of like, I'm a dumb guy. I don't know what's going on. What's going on here today? And he said, well, we're protesting Project 2025. And I'm like, okay, well, that was an interesting way to say it because I know this is a No Kings protest, but he didn't say that. He said they were protesting Project 2025. And I said, okay. I said, what is Project 2025? And his response was, you got to look into it. You got to read up on it. And I said, okay. I said, I will. But like, can you summarize it for me? I said, you're out here protesting it. I know there's a talking point. Like, just summarize it for me so I know. And he said, Trump's trying to take everything over. And I said, okay. I said, so is this like the No Kings protest that I saw about on Facebook and stuff? And he's like, well, yeah. I said, okay. I said, so this is a Trump thing. And he said, well, no, it's not a Trump thing. It's, we don't want to be like authoritarian rule and this, that, and the other. I said, okay. I said, we're still a democracy. He's like, well, yeah, but I said, okay. And he said, but Trump has Hitler books on his nightstand. And I said, Hitler books? So what are you talking about? He goes, yeah. He said, like the Mein Kampf, he's got like Hitler books on his nightstand. And I said, really? So, sidebar, I looked into that after, our conversation. And that rumor is associated with a book, I guess, that one of Trump's ex-wives wrote back in the 90s, whenever she was just basically trying to badmouth him through the divorce. And then she later rescinded that. But she said that, and like people like this guy still believe it. So, I mean, it's a thing that they believe in their heart. And so I said, okay. I said, I didn't know that. I never heard of that. And he said, yeah. He said, Trump puts the most money of any country into our armed services. And I said, okay. He said, the last person that did that was Hitler before they killed the Jews. And I said, well, let's back it up a minute. I said, having a strong military protects our country, I feel like. And he's like, well, that's true. I said, you served in the military. I said, so you would know more than I would. And he's like, well, no, he's like, I do agree with that. I said, okay. I said, and you said Hitler killed the Jews. I said, that was terrible. Like, what Hitler did was terrible. Like the Holocaust, the whole nine. I said, that was terrible. I said, but you think that Trump is going to do that? He goes, well, he's starting to do it right now. I said, are you talking about like with illegal immigrants and like sending them back to, their home countries? And he goes, yeah. He said, that's how it starts. And I said, I said, I guess my viewpoint is that if you didn't enter the country legally, then you don't really have a right to be here. I said, do you not agree with that? Like, do you not agree with the right way of doing things? And he's like, well, yeah, I agree that there has to be a right way of doing things. I'm like, okay, so we agree on that. And so, so far, a couple of the reasons that he was out there was Trump, supporting Project 2025, which there was no real explanation of what that was. And I looked it up, and there's no link between Trump and Project 2025. It seems like something dreamed up, maybe. A Holocaust, which is like deporting illegal immigrants, is not even a drop in the bucket to what the Jews went through during the Holocaust. So it's like a complete unfair comparison. And a Nazi book that was reportedly on a nightstand that his ex-wife said. So these are like three of the reasons. And I'm like, this seems kind of like a weak argument. I said, let me ask you this. I said, something I've heard in the past is that like Trump's going to do away with Social Security. I said, is that something you're concerned about? And he said, oh, Trump's not doing away with Social Security. I'm not worried about that. He said, he just doesn't need to have all the power. And I said, isn't it kind of weird that like this protest is going on while the Democrats are fighting for health care for illegal immigrants that you agree aren't supposed to be in the country, but them shutting down the government actually gives Trump more power, and this is the party that like you're counting on? And he's like, well, yeah, I don't like that either. And I said, okay. So we agree on that too. And that's what I was saying to him. Like, we agree on a lot of things. I just didn't see like where his need to protest was. Like, if he just wanted to be like part of something, I get that. You want to be part of something, but there's other things to be part of. But what it boiled down to was, he said to me, here's the thing. He said, Trump is 6 months younger than me. I was fighting in Vietnam whenever I was running through the forest, fighting for our country, trying to not die. Donald Trump was on the golf course because he had bone spurs and couldn't serve. So this was the actual reason that this gentleman was protesting. It wasn't because of Project 2025. It wasn't because of a Nazi book. It wasn't because of illegal immigration. What it came down to was he fought for our country. He made that decision, and I thank him for it. I mean, my wife and I, we all the time say how thankful we are for veterans. I mean, they deserve so much more than they get, so much more credit, so much more reward. But he felt like he fought for our country and Donald Trump didn't. And so he's harbored this, ill will towards Trump for years. And that's why he's part of the No Kings movement. It has nothing to do with any kind of talking points, has nothing to do with Project 2025. In fact, when I asked him about it, he kept like pointing to this one lady in the crowd, and he's like, well, she's the teacher and she's the one that put all this together. And I was like, yeah, I said, I don't really want to talk to her because like, I'm sure that she, has all kinds of weird statistics on why she thinks what she thinks is right. I just want to talk to the average person that's out here protesting, right? Like, that's why I wanted to talk to this guy. And it really opened my eyes, I think, to what this situation is. I think it's a product of misinformation or no information. Misinformation from trusted resources and no information to back up why a protest is needed. I feel like the No Kings protest was something that we've been doing a long time. And it started July 4th of 1776, whenever, we became our own independent country and we had no kings. And that's when everybody celebrates that. This, to put a spin on it and put like no kings, I mean, this is an anti-Trump rally. This is a rally that will die whenever Trump is out of office. It will. And if for some reason the next term the president is a Democrat, there will not be a No Kings protest. There will not be Republicans on the side of the road claiming No Kings protest day. It didn't happen with Biden. It's not going to happen going forward. This is a product of Trump derangement syndrome, or, you see that all over the place. I mean, it's literally what it is. And it's, I mean, it's a movement. And it's like I told this guy, everybody has a right to, voice their opinion. I'm all for it. I mean, that's what I'm doing right here, is voicing my opinion. I mean, take it or leave it. I don't know. I think people want to be part of something. I think that everybody wants to be part of something and feel like they're valued. And I think that this is that for some people. I don't think anything bad about them. I think they're misinformed. You may be watching this, think I'm misinformed, and you feel bad for me, and that's fine. But I'm good. So I don't know. That's just kind of, my observations, my thoughts on the No Kings Day situation that I've run into. To be fair, I've kind of had my head in the sand on this stuff for quite a while. And, my eyes have been open recently to kind of, what's going on. And I think conversations with people are a way to understand their viewpoint. Like, not, I guess, understand their viewpoint, like why they're doing something. You don't have to agree with their viewpoint, but at least, maybe you can get an idea of like what they're thinking. I still think it's a waste of time. I think it's ironic too that this comes after a historical peace treaty in the Middle East. Like, we've been saying peace in the Middle East for since I was 11 years old or something like that, for different reasons. And now it's like 100%, that's the deal. But hey, you want to get out and protest, get out and protest. But if you want to do something else, you can do that too. Just my thoughts.